Okay guys, so in this video we are going to talk about continuous integration and how it actually works. So let's get into it. Basically what we're going to cover is continuous integration, or from this point on CI, and why we use CI and how we use it in a secure way basically. So basically I had this question posted to me. This is a little while ago, but I unfortunately haven't had time to set this together because it's a fairly elaborate question. So basically the question is, can you make a video on how to configure the workflow between production development and local environments, something relevant nowadays in the industry, maybe with Git and Docker, and taking security into consideration? Now the reason why I'm going to talk to you about CI is because it is the only common denominator that I can find in this request. Because if I were to talk to you about setting up a production environment, a development environment, or a staging environment, if that's what you want to call it, and a local environment, the only thing that they all three have in common when you're doing daily work is that they are part of what we call a CI pipeline or a CD pipeline, continuous delivery, but we're going to call it CI. And this is so common today that I would go as far as to say that it's standard practice pretty much for every company to have some type of pipeline. Now, it used to be the case that, I mean, this isn't a new concept necessarily, it's just that now we have a workflow or a philosophy around how to do this. It used to be the case that the developer would build the stuff, like the code on their computer, save it to a tarball or something like that, and then go into SSH into some remote environment or use FTP or something like that, and upload the code directly into the running live system. Since then, we have gone away from this towards CI solutions. Now, you may have heard of some of the most common CI products out on the market, which are going to be GitLab, Jenkins, Travis, and GitHub Actions, which is fairly recent at the time of recording this video. Now, GitLab and Jenkins are a little bit special in the sense that they are self-hostable. In other words, you can have a service provided to you by GitLab so that you can actually host on their systems, but you can also self-host it, which is in this video we are actually going to use GitLab. Now we can use Jenkins, of course, but I can do that in a separate video. We're going to use GitLab in this version. And so what's powerful about being able to self-host something is that it gives you the ability to run your system the way that you want it to. You can run your CI pipeline however you want. You can run it on a local laptop like I'm doing right now, or you can have an on-prem type of solution where you have your own hardware or something like that. You can even set up something in the cloud. You could have a VPN or a VPC or something like that, where you have a bunch of boxes that simply host all of this code. Now, if that's not to your likings, there are Travis and GitHub as an example. I mean, even GitLab does provide this. They'll give you options where you don't actually have to manage this. You'll just pay them and then they will set everything up for you. But I want to walk you through how this actually works. So if we have a look at my Docker Compose file here, all that I've basically done here is that I've set up two things that are crucial in order for us to run a CI pipeline. The first thing is going to be the actual platform itself, which is going to be GitLab. This is the community edition that I'm using. And I also have a runner. Now, what is a runner? Well, a runner is an instance of a computer. In this case, it's going to be a Docker image that is going to execute the CI task, or the jobs as we call them. Now, the jobs are just different things that I would have had to do myself in order to validate that my code is ready to go out into production. We're going to touch on that a little bit closer in just a moment, but I want you to understand that the entire idea behind having a platform like this is to make sure that the code is working and that it meets your requirements before you do you actually release it out into production. And that's powerful, because if you have a team of maybe, I don't know how many developers, it's impossible for you to synchronize all of these people if they're working on their own workstation. So this creates a common hub where everybody goes through the same pipeline. That is what the CI pipeline is all about. So let's actually go over to my, let's see here, we have a bunch of stuff here. Here is, well, this is basically GitLab. So if this is your first time seeing GitLab, congratulations. You now, well, I'm not doing GitLab as much justice as I would like because unfortunately my tiny little MacBook Air here is struggling a little bit, I'm gonna have to admit. Now, I'm not gonna say that that's because GitLab is based on Ruby technology, but it might be relevant. Anywho, once this is loaded, we'll see here that here is my overview and here are my different projects. Now, I am the administrator, as you can see, and ideally, from a security perspective, that's not a great thing. If you're dealing with admin accounts, just a good practice in general is that you keep your admin password safely locked away on a piece of paper in a safe somewhere or something like that, and you create accounts that have limited access rights for what you actually need to be doing. But since I'm not going to maintain this project, I'm going to stick with being an administrator. And here I've created my example project. So if we slowly but surely make our way into the project, here it is. So here is my Git repository. So for those of you who are new to this, you may have only thought about GitHub as being this place where you store all your code, or maybe you're using Bitbucket, something like that. But this is all the code that I have for my project, and this is the powerful part about Git. You don't actually have to have something like GitHub or something like or any other hosting system. You can host a repository on your own local laptop, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. So here are all of my files, and as you can see here, there are so many options that I can deal with. And what's powerful about this is that this is now just a platform where all of the code is shared between myself and my, in this case, imaginary coworkers. But this is, just so you know, exactly, well, until very recently, we worked at my current job, and we used to work this way in my previous job. But in that case, we didn't use GitLab, or rather we were starting to use GitLab, but we were using Jenkins. So what you're seeing right now, and the thing that I'm saying is, this is very, very ordinary stuff for any modern IT company. So when we're dealing with CI pipelines, the first thing we're going to want to go over to is to look over the CI/CD this tab here, and here you'll see that I have a few options. So I have the pipelines and I have the jobs. So let's just go and look at the jobs first and foremost, because the first I want you to grasp that this is just an ordinary thing that happens as part of every time you push code. That is what the pipeline is there to do. So I, as the developer, I make a change on my computer, and then I push those changes when I feel that I'm good and ready, either up to a merge request or something like that, or I can push it directly in this scenario because I don't need to follow any practices. And the pipeline will kick in. It will start executing scripts that I and my coworkers have written in order to do something that needs to be done. And that is what a job is all about. So if I go in and I check one of these jobs here as an example, we will see the execution of what that job has actually done. So here is the log of what this job has done. So you can see here, if you read through here, that okay, so it's preparing the shell called the shell executor, and that just means that I'm going to run my job in the shell of my Docker image, the runner that is actually doing this. And remember, the runner is just a Docker image. I'll just show you. Docker PS. So here you'll see that I have my GitLab image, which is the thing that I'm accessing right now, and then I have the runner. I can do docker exec it runner bash and go right in there. This is now I'm inside of the computer or the Docker image that ran this code. I'm literally inside of this place right here. I can even do, let's see, docker logs runner, and I will see here all the logs that come out from just running the system. So that's hopefully clear to you that all of this is happening inside of that image. So the first thing this image is going to do now is that it's going to clone my Git repository. It's going to go to the overview, or well, not technically, but it's going to go and get that code you already saw, right? So once it's done that, it's going to pull down all that code, and then it's going to go into executing the scripts that I've created, because what I want here is to create a situation where there's nothing that can go wrong if everything is done from scratch. Because as a developer, you may have your own personal workflow. You may be doing things by yourself that may not be relevant for the main code base. But we, as the community of developers that are working on this project, we need to agree on that there has to be a master version of how we do things. So you, as the individual developer, when you're working on your laptop, you're free to do whatever you want, as long as the end result abide by certain rules that we have set. So then I run npm install, and I pull down all of the packages that I'm going to need in order to execute my testing, or whatever I need to do. In this case, it's testing. So what I'm then going to do is that I'm going to run npm test, and it's just going to run jest. Notice here that all it does, I could do this on my own laptop. That's all. It's not doing anything magical. It's doing the exact same thing. It's just automated so that I don't have to do it myself. And then it tells me that, hey, this was successful, and that's the whole job. Now I've just executed a job. So that's something I really want you to burn into your mind. A job is just a script that does something that I could have done myself, but it's just much smoother to automate it so that I don't have to do it myself. That's what it is. So what is a pipeline? Well, a pipeline is just a sequence of jobs. That's all it is. So basically what I'm doing now is that I'm segmenting up the different steps that I need to take in order for some pipeline to be completed. I might have many things that I want to do, right? And I might want to build might need to compile code, I might need to test code, I need to deploy it, maybe I want to lint it to check that it's actually working, stuff like that, right? So if I go in and I check here the latest push that I made a few minutes ago, well, technically 18 minutes ago, this is a pipeline. And this is what the CI pipeline mindset is coming from. This is what it's all about. So you'll see here that the first job that ran was the test job. And then technically, no, this is not in order actually, but it's going to run all of these things, all these different jobs. So you have a build, and you have a deployment, and then you have a test. They're not in order, because I've declared them in a different order. But that's what a pipeline is. It's just a set of scripts that are going to do some work. It can be anything, and we'll look at the script configuration file in just a moment. And that just makes the life of all the developers so much smoother. So if you have a really good, strong CI pipeline, odds you're going to be able to make sure that all the code is working, all the styles that you have agreed on are working, so that you're not introducing lint issues or stuff like that, and you're going to be able to deploy your code automatically, or at the very least build Docker images or tarballs or whatever you're using at your company. It's very flexible, so it's not like you have to have a specific workflow. You can design it however you want. You could do things like, whenever you build something, there's going to be a network call to your Twitter feed that states that, hey guys, we just deployed something, or maybe to your Slack channel, hey guys, this build is now building. Just so you know, the sky's the limit with this. And that's the most important thing to understand here. This is just a way to automate all that work so a human doesn't have to do it, which reduces problems with, as I was saying, people doing it incorrectly, stuff like that. And of course, people doing the same work at the same time. So if I go into my example code here, you'll notice that I have this little GitLab CI YAML file. And here are my declared jobs, or my scripts. These are the jobs. So you'll see here that I've declared a few stages. So I've said that, okay, I have a test stage, I have a build stage, and I have a deploy stage, which means that everything that's labeled with test is going to run first, and then the build is going to run, and then the deploy, assuming that the tests are actually working. And then we're just going to go through it, right? So that is the essence of what's going on here. So there is one thing that I haven't been doing that I should add now, which is that I am not linting my code. I'm not checking for lint issues. I have ESLint here, I have it configured, and although in my local environment I might be very good at making sure that, making sure that I have single quotes instead of double quotes, etc. I might not have, who is guaranteed that, right? If someone makes a mistake and pushes that code into the repository, well, then the main code base is going to ignore that lint issue. So I really need to make sure that I'm linting the code that is trying to get into my to the main repository. So I can do something like this. I can add npm run lint, because if I go to my package.json file here, I have this script here called lint. And if I just add that in there, so let's go and let's do something like example, and let's just commit that, and then let's do git push, and that's now going to push my changes. Now, what's happening here is that my personal workflow is actually running. And I'm going to touch on that as well, because it's part of the question that was posed. So now I've just pushed my code, and if I now go to my pipelines, it's a little bit slow for my taste, but hopefully we can bear with it. And usually it's a bit, I mean, if you're running this on a higher end computer than my little laptop, it's going to be a little bit faster. Come on! So we're loading and we're loading and we're loading. Hopefully it's going to resolve very soon, but in the meantime I can just state that what usually goes on when we're dealing with pushes like this is that you have different people pushing different jobs. So I mean, I'm the only user here, but as you can see, there could be tons and tons of different jobs to be that are pushed at the same time. So this can be a bit of a bottleneck for us, that there is like I mean, you're going to have to allocate resources. So if you have 50 different developers who are all pushing code at the same time for different branches, you're going to have to pay some money to make this possible. So I mean, if you can avoid using a CI pipeline, if you're like one developer or two developers working on your little startup, then this may not be necessary. This becomes more necessary when you have a lot of people working on the same stuff. As you can see now, this page has loaded, and this is now running my CI pipeline. So what's going on here is that it is literally now executing all of the stages that, as you can see here, these two are paused now until once the test stage is over. So if I go into this job here, that is part of my pipeline, and remember, a pipeline is just a sequence of jobs. That's all it is. And we have a look at what it's actually doing under the hood. We're going to see these logs again, and it should show us that it's now not only, well, it's just pulled down all of my, it's right now installing my dependencies. So if this is just, as I was saying, it's just doing this over and over, and it's doing it because it wants, we need to be sure that if I start from scratch, I'm going to get working code, so that you as the developer haven't done something weird that makes it work on your laptop but not in the actual environments, right? Now, ideally, you want to make sure to think about a few things that are good practice when you are dealing with these sorts of repository. Number one is that you never ever put like sensitive tokens or API keys or stuff like that in your repository. Even if I were to run this machine here on my virtual cloud or like a virtual private cloud or VPC or something like that, it's not good practice, because if, as you can imagine, if anybody gets access to this platform and they get access to the repository, they can get at all of the stuff that I have done. And if they can go through the Git history, they can find my secret tokens and all my keys and stuff like that. And the same thing goes if this is running on my laptop, but if I'm going to make this available to many developers who might be working remotely and stuff like that, I can't put this on the public internet. I need to create some type of VPN solution or a VPC or something like that to make it secure for people to work with all of this, so that no random hacker on the internet can just scan and find this URL and then get into my system, right? So that's why CI pipelines are not very common in personal workflows. These are usually platforms that are used by companies. As you can see now, the first thing that's happening is that it's running npm lint. And that's just because I updated and the linting passed, and then it's going to move over to the test. If any of this fails, it's going to fail my pipeline. So now I have my own personal pipeline here on my local computer. that does something nice, and we're going to touch on that in just a moment. But as you can imagine now, now that I have this linter here, if I remove my lint check, my local lint check, and I make some mistake, let's say that I'm a wild man, and I go and do something like that, and I break the convention of what's going on here. I'm adding double quotes instead of single quotes. Now, if I commit this, I'm not going to make that work because I have a commit hook that is going to lint my code locally, and we're going to touch on that as I said. But let's say that I just didn't have a personal workflow where I did all of this. That wouldn't matter, because if I push my code and this is not what all of the developers on the project have agreed on that I should be doing, the linter from this job is going to break. And it's going to stop me from actually pushing my code. And I'm going to have to fix it until I can get through the pipeline. And that's why the pipeline is there, to make sure that everybody's doing the thing that we all agreed on. And then, of course, also offload all the manual work that comes with it. So let's talk about personal development. So as I was saying, all of these jobs are just something that I could be doing myself. And I have. So what I have done is that I have added this thing here. Now let's actually close that down there. So let's say code.git, and let's go to my Git folder, let's go to my hooks, and let's go to pre-push. So this is my pre-push hook, and what that basically means is that this is a script that is going to run before I try to push my code to my remote repository. And as you can see here, all it is a shell script that is going to run npm run lint and npm test. That's it. And it is the exact same thing that this thing here is doing. And the reason why I'm doing this is because of, one, it's going to save me time, because as you can see here, if I'm pushing my code and then a remote box like my little Docker image here is going to have to run this code. Imagine if I have maybe 30 or 40 other coworkers who are doing the same thing. That's going to take longer than if I just run it directly on my computer. So instead of pushing the code, I'm doing this locally before I push my code, so just to make sure that I didn't do anything weird, or that at least the easier tests and lints can be caught this way. So what I want you to take away from this is that the idea of a CI pipeline is just that you are trying to create a workflow where there is a remote working environment that has the truth of what your project is supposed to look like. All your tests are running there, all your linters are running there, all your security checks are running. All of this stuff is automated in this remote platform, such as GitLab or Jenkins or GitHub Actions, etc. This makes it possible for you to be sure that every developer who is pushing code to your repository has the same overview. They can see the same thing, they have an understanding of what everybody's working on, and they have to follow the same rules. They can work however they want on their local laptops, and it's possible for them to have their own personal workflow. But before they commit code to the master branches or to the repository, or before they're allowed to do that, they have to abide by the rules that everybody has agreed on. And then the CI pipeline takes care of the rest. And each job that you declare is just a script that does something. I mean, in my simple little example here, my entire my stuff here is very, very, very easy. If I go to examples and I say code dot, so I open up the terminal again, or my Visual Studio Code Editor, and I check these scripts here. These are just echoing out, that I'm building the product into a Docker image and then I'm deploying my code. But I could add scripts here as well that would do that exact thing. I could actually add something like docker build dot. I mean, as I'm saying, it's just a shell script in this scenario. I could execute any code I wanted to, and then my CI pipeline is going to pick that up, build the code from the remote repository into an image, and then upload it to my private repository or Docker images or stuff like that. And in my deploy case, maybe all it does is that it has another instance somewhere that is running where all my users are visiting my application, and that's just going to go and run after all of this is done and pull down the code or pull down the Docker image and then start that Docker image on that remote box. That is what a CI pipeline is about. It's about automation and being consistent with the rules that have been set for all the developers. Hopefully this made sense to you. Have a great day.